of Cleveland President Beth Hammack has spoken out firmly in favor of central bank independence. She told a conference Thursday that independence is essential to meeting the Fed's goals of maximum employment and price stability. And for those of you managing your certificates and keeping your paperwork straight, Ship Technology has published a guide to understanding STCW regulations and how they impact crew certification. Worth a look next time you're tied up and have a quiet hour. Finally, Ship Technology is also covering advances in deep water lifting systems, specifically how the industry is moving beyond the dangers of snapback. If you work in offshore operations, that one's for you. That is your shipping bulletin.
MSC Cruises is hiring at Chennai, Bangalore, Kochi and Goa. Become part of our team by registering online on social media, Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn at MSC Crewing Services India Cruises.
Sailor Today, since 1991. Distributed in India, USA, UK, Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Thailand.
It's 6:31.
You are listening to Sailor Today International Maritime Radio. Coming up next, the Captain Sanjay Chopra Show, Episode 66. Stay with us.
Hello friends and listeners. Welcome back to the Captain Sanjay Chopra Show, where I resume my story where I stopped in the last episode. Finally, the day arrived for my departure to join the vessel in Bilbao. A couple of days earlier, we had moved to my maternal aunt Sukshamanti's home in Chembur, so we could spend a little more time together before I sailed off. It was the 4th of Jan 1988 when Vanita with heavy heart came to see me off at Bombay Airport. After spending a few days with my aunt and uncle and cousins, she would also board a flight back to Delhi to stay with my parents. As my aircraft lifted off from Bombay, an overwhelming emptiness settled inside me. For the first time, the reality truly sank in. I would not see the woman I loved for a long while. Yet, deep down, we both knew this moment was inevitable. Such was the life we had chosen, the life of a merchant naval officer and the sacrifices that came with it. I relieved the outgoing second officer after reasonable time for handover and familiarizing with the ship. What demanded even greater attention, however, was our upcoming voyage to Porto Trombetas through the Amazon basin. It was considered a challenging port of call, and none of the navigating officers on board, including the master, had previously sailed there. I immersed myself in studying the approaches, the river navigation, tide patterns, and every detail I could gather about the passage. Our departure from the Bay of Biscay lived up to its notorious reputation. The weather was unforgiving. Sailing in ballast condition, the ship was extremely light and she rolled and pitched violently through the winter seas. The Bay of Biscay, especially during winter, could be merciless, and this voyage was no exception. Thankfully, after a little over a day, the weather eased and the vessel finally settled into a steadier rhythm as we shaped our course towards the Amazon and the distant northwestern coast of Brazil. The initial days on board were intensely busy as I settled into my responsibilities. But whenever I found a little quiet time, I resumed my daily ritual of writing letters to Vanita. She was constantly on my mind, and I missed her deeply. The company required a minimum 3-month-long waiting period before spouses could officially join officers on board. But the thought of waiting that long felt unbearable. I was determined somehow to persuade both the master and the company to allow her to join earlier when the vessel returned to Europe the next month. To keep myself occupied, I buried myself in work, often for about 14 hours a day. Beyond my own duties, I eagerly learned the chief officer's responsibilities as well, studying load indicator operations, stability calculations, stress factors, and every aspect involved in the loading and operating of a bulk carrier safely. Yet, despite the long hours and constant activity, the loneliness returned whenever I was alone in my cabin. In those quiet moments, I missed Vanita even more and longed for the day she would finally join me on board. At such times, one song seemed to echo my feelings perfectly. वो जब याद आए, बहुत याद आए. From the film Parasmani, originally sung by Mohammed Rafi and Lata Mangeshkar, with lyrics by Asad Bhopali and music composed by Lakshmi Kant Pyare Lal. The song captured closely our emotions that time. Here it is in my voice. Hope you all like it. वो जब याद आए, बहुत याद आए. वो जब याद आए, बहुत याद आए. गमे जिंदगी के अंधेरे में हमने चिरागे मुहब्बत जलाए बुझाए. वो जब याद आए, बहुत याद आए. रास्ते हंस दिए, हम कर दिल उठे हम किसी के लिए. कई बार ऐसा भी धोखा हुआ है, चले आ रहे हैं वो नजरें झुकाए. वो जब याद आए, बहुत याद आए. वो जब याद आए, बहुत याद आए. वो जब याद आए, बहुत याद आए. गमे जिंदगी के अंधेरे में हमने चिरागे मुहब्बत जलाए बुझाए. वो जब याद आए, बहुत याद आए. सुलगने लगा, अश्क बहने लगे. जाने क्या क्या हमें लोग कहने लगे. मगर रोते रोते हंसी आ गई है. ख्यालों में जब याद आए, बहुत याद आए. The approach to Porto Trombetas through the Amazon basin was far from routine. Ships entered via the feared Barra Norte, or the North Bar, notorious for shifting sandbanks, strong currents, and strict draft restrictions of about 11.5 meters. After crossing the bar, vessels traveled 174 nautical miles to Fazendina Pilot Station near Macapa for formalities and pilot boarding. Then continued another 430 nautical miles through the Amazon before entering the Trombetas River for the final 60 miles to the bauxite terminal. For me, the greatest challenge was calculating the precise high tide window for safely crossing the North Bar. Inward passage was manageable because the ship was light, but outward passage after loading bauxite was critical. Even a couple of inches of excess draft could prove disastrous. The nearly 600-mile voyage upriver into the heart of Amazon was unlike anything I had experienced before. The vessel wound its way slowly through the narrow river channels bordered by endless, dense forest. At times, exotic birds swept across the skies and came visiting the ship, while strange movements in the water and along the riverbanks hinted at the hidden life of the rainforest. There was a surreal beauty to it all, a feeling of traveling through another world untouched by time. As I stood on deck watching the Amazon drift past, I could not help thinking of Vanita. I knew instantly how much she would have loved this extraordinary experience. Somewhere in my heart, I already hoped she would join me on a future voyage to Trombetas. That dream eventually came true, and I will share that unforgettable journey with her in a future episode. At the loading port, tensions slowly built between charterers and the master. The charterers naturally wanted the vessel loaded to maximum capacity, while the master remained deeply concerned about the draft restrictions at the North Bar for the outward passage. Every ton mattered. The atmosphere on board became increasingly tense as calculations were revised repeatedly to determine exactly how much cargo could be safely carried. The master was an experienced seaman, though also an extremely cautious man who preferred to leave nothing to chance. He did not rely solely on chief officer's calculations and asked me to independently verify every stability and draft computation. It was both demanding and deeply satisfying to earn his confidence during such a critical operation. The final topping up of cargo to the agreed sailing draft was one of the most nerve-wracking loading operations I had witnessed. We deck officers hung on Jacob's ladders near the draft marks with walkie-talkies in hand, monitoring every fraction of an inch as cargo loading continued. The vessel could not exceed the agreed draft by even a millimeter, as everything depended on the tide conditions calculated for our departure. Even after loading was completed, the master continued asking me to recalculate our expected underkeel clearance over the shallowest section of the bar. Again and again, I worked through the figures to reassure him that we would reach the critical point precisely at peak of high tide and clear safely without touching bottom. As the fate would have it, the actual crossing of the North Bar fell during my night watch. The master kept the chief officer beside him on the bridge while I was sent down on deck to take manual sounding using a hand-led line. He trusted neither calculations alone nor the echo sounder completely. It remains one of the most vivid memories of my seafaring life. In the darkness of the night, with strong winds blowing and the vessel barely crawling ahead, I stood on an overside platform with safety belt tied, taking soundings the old-fashioned way, swinging the lead line forward, letting it dip perfectly into the water and reading the depth as the line tightened when the heavy lead just about touched against the seabed. Despite the difficult conditions, the procedure worked remarkably well, and I managed to obtain reliable soundings throughout. The ship crossed the bar at the slowest possible speed with barely 6 inches clearance beneath her keel. When we finally cleared safely into deeper water, an enormous sense of relief swept across the entire ship. By then, the master's confidence in me had grown considerably. It was the perfect moment to make a request close to my heart: permission for my wife to join the vessel later in Lisbon, where the ship was scheduled to dry dock after discharging cargo at Bilbao, even though I would have completed only about 5 weeks on board. To my happiness, the master responded warmly. He said he had no objection and promised to do his